My name is Margaret Collins, and I am 71 years old. The words that still echo in my head are these: only special people were invited. That was the sentence that shattered me, spoken with a smug little smile by the woman who had just stolen my son's heart and, apparently, erased me from his life. Before I continue, I want you to pause for a moment and put yourself in my shoes. Imagine standing in your own living room, in front of your only child, after years of sacrifice, only to be told that you were not special enough to witness the most important day of his life. Would you have stayed silent? Would you have forgiven? Or would something inside you have broken, just like it did for me? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. And before we dive deeper, please make sure to subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because this story is not just mine, it might be a warning for every parent out there. Now, let me take you back to the exact moment it all began. I picked up the phone, an ordinary Thursday afternoon, ready to ask my son David a simple, happy question: when's the wedding date? I had been waiting for that moment for years. I imagined him chuckling, maybe sounding nervous, telling me, "Next month, Mom," or "We're still planning." But instead, Clara, his fiancée, who had wormed her way into every corner of our lives, snatched the phone, locked her icy eyes on mine, and with that dreadful little smirk said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a blade sliding under my ribs. Special people. I had paid their rent for 3 years, $500 every month, sometimes more when they forgot utilities. I had bought every piece of furniture in their apartment. I had filled their fridge with food when they claimed they had nothing to eat. I had been there for every tearful phone call, every emergency, that turned out to be a whim. And yet, at that altar, in that white-draped room with champagne glasses and family gathered, I was not a special person. I remember staring at David, hoping, praying he would correct her, that he would laugh nervously and say, "She's joking, Mom. Of course we wanted you there." But he didn't. He kept his eyes on the carpet, shoulders slumped like a guilty schoolboy, unable to look at me. Meanwhile, Clara sank back into the sofa I had purchased for them, stretching her legs with the arrogance of someone who had just won. The pink dress I had bought for the wedding, $200 I shouldn't have spent on my fixed income, was still hanging in my closet, tags attached. Next to it, the new shoes, waiting for a day that would never come. I had even saved $1,000 to gift them so they could start married life with ease. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to share the happy news, already imagining her tears of joy. I had scrubbed my home spotless, thinking they might come over after the ceremony so we could celebrate together. All those dreams collapsed into ash with those 4 poisoned words: only special people. David finally lifted his gaze, and in a voice so rehearsed it felt like he was reading from a script, muttered, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just us and the witnesses." But I already knew the truth. The universe these days has no secrets. Social media tells all. I had seen the photos, Clara's parents beaming proudly beside the bride and groom, her siblings clinking champagne flutes. Clara, in a sparkling white gown I had unknowingly funded, $800 slipped into her account just a month before under the guise of personal expenses. My son's smile, wide and bright, as he posed with everyone but me. Do you know what it feels like to realize you've been excluded from your child's wedding? It isn't just sadness. It's a cold kind of grief, mixed with humiliation so sharp it burns. It makes you question everything, every bedtime story, every scraped knee you kissed, every sacrifice you made to keep them safe and happy. It makes you wonder, did he ever love me? Or was I just a stepping stone until Clara's family took my place? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My hands shook with anger, but my heart ached with something worse: emptiness. I thought about the countless evenings when I skipped dinners out with friends to wire them money. The times I patched up my old coat instead of buying a new one because Clara needed another shopping spree. I thought about how many times I reminded myself, they'll appreciate it one day. They'll realize how much I love them. And now? I wasn't even good enough for a chair at their wedding. But I want you to listen carefully here. This wasn't the end of the story. No, this was just the opening wound, the first cut in a series of betrayals that would drag me into the darkest fight of my life. Betrayals that would force me to stand taller than I ever thought possible. Because the day I was told I wasn't special, that was the day I discovered just how powerful I could be when I finally chose to fight back. The morning after Clara's words carved themselves into my memory, I woke up with an ache in my chest that felt like it had aged me 10 years overnight. The house was quiet, too quiet. For years, that silence had been filled with constant interruptions, phone calls begging for a little help, knocks on the door with requests for groceries, urgent texts that said, "Can you please transfer now? We'll pay you back soon." I had lived in that rhythm, my life revolving around their needs. And now, after being told I wasn't special, every one of those memories replayed in my mind like a cruel joke. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I had spent so many nights balancing my checkbook, shifting money from my modest pension and the savings my late husband Robert had left me. And I thought about every dollar that had disappeared into the black hole of David and Clara's lives. 3 years, 36 months of rent, $500 a month, $18,000 gone. I remembered the very first time I agreed to cover it. David had lost his job, and Clara claimed she was between internships. They showed up at my house in tears, saying the landlord was threatening to throw them out. I had written that first check with shaky hands but a hopeful heart, believing it was just a temporary setback. I told myself, this is what mothers do. But months turned into years, and each month, without fail, I wired the money like clockwork. Not once did they suggest paying me back. Not once did they even say, "Mom, we'll take care of it this time." And it wasn't just the rent. Oh no, it was everything else too. $200 here, $300 there. Groceries for their fridge because Clara insisted organic food was essential for her health. Medical bills when she suddenly developed mysterious conditions. $800 for a dental emergency that, oddly, never appeared on any receipt. $2,500 for a car loan they promised to repay as soon as taxes come back. They never did. I thought about the $1,200 I spent on their living room set sofa, coffee table, rug because they wanted to host friends and didn't want to look cheap. The irony? That very sofa was where Clara had reclined smugly while telling me I wasn't special. And the gifts. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas. They always hinted at what they wanted: new shoes, fancy perfume, a smartwatch, and I always obliged, because that's what mothers do, right? They give, even when it hurts, even when it empties their own lives. I added the numbers in my head as I sipped my bitter coffee. $18,000 for rent, $7,000 for food, at least $3,000 in gifts, $800 for emergencies, $2,500 for that car loan, $600 for the broken air conditioner, and then smaller things: gas money, clothes, trips. My stomach churned as I realized the total. More than $33,000. $33,000, gone from the savings that Robert had left so I could live out my final years in peace. Money meant for comfort, for travel, for security. Instead, it had been funneled into keeping 2 grown adults afloat, adults who excluded me from their vows of forever. The emotional toll was heavier than the money. I remembered the friendships I had let fade because I was too embarrassed to admit how much of my retirement was being siphoned away. The hobbies I abandoned: painting, choir, even simple gardening, because every time I wanted to spend $1 on myself, I thought, but David might need this. Clara might ask for help. I remembered eating beans and rice for dinner 3 nights a week so I could send them an extra $100. I remembered patching my old winter coat instead of buying a new one because Clara needed money for wedding planning. Wedding planning I wasn't even a part of. And what did I get in return? Not love. Not gratitude. Not even a phone call just to ask, "How are you, Mom?" No, the only time my phone lit up with David's name was when they wanted something. I had been living as a shadow of myself, confusing financial support with affection. I thought that if I gave enough, if I poured every drop of myself into them, they would see me as indispensable. That somehow my money could buy me a place in their hearts. But now I knew better. My love had been currency. My presence had been irrelevant. I looked around my house and saw the evidence everywhere. The bills stacked on the counter, some unpaid because I had chosen theirs over mine. The half-empty fridge, because I had prioritized filling theirs. The closet with that pale pink dress I had bought for a wedding I was never invited to. Every object whispered humiliation. Every corner reminded me of my foolish sacrifices. But what cut deepest wasn't just the waste of money or the lost years. It was the realization that, in their eyes, I had never been a mother. I had been an ATM with a pulse. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, feeling the tremor in my hands. The shame was unbearable, but beneath it, something else was stirring. Something sharp, something I hadn't felt in decades. anger. Not the kind that explodes and vanishes, but a slow, simmering rage that grows roots. And for the first time in years, I whispered aloud, "No more." The day after Clara's cruel words, I forced myself to get dressed, to step out of the house, to act as though life were normal, but inside, everything was broken. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my phone, and that's when the real dagger pierced me, not through their words, but through images on a glowing screen. There they were, my son David and Clara, smiling wide beneath an arch of white roses, champagne flutes raised. Clara's parents standing proudly beside them, arms looped as though they had just gained something precious, her siblings clinking glasses in celebration. Aunts, cousins, friends, all of them included in a moment I had spent years dreaming about. And me? Nowhere. Not a shadow, not a seat in the back row, not even a mention in the captions. The photos told a truth sharper than Clara's smirk. I wasn't absent by accident. I had been deliberately erased. I stared at Clara's dress, shimmering satin and lace, the same one she had begged me to help with just weeks earlier. "It's too expensive, Margaret, but it's the only one that makes me feel beautiful." And I, like a fool, had handed her $800, convincing myself it was a blessing, an investment in love and family. I didn't know I was financing my own humiliation. Scrolling further, I saw the ring gleaming gold, simple but elegant. I had given them money for miscellaneous expenses not long before. Was this where it went? My mind cataloged every expense, every transfer, every time I had convinced myself I was supporting their future. All of it was in those photos. But where was I? Nowhere. The comments under the pictures cut deeper. "Beautiful couple. So glad we could celebrate together. Best wedding ever." Strangers and acquaintances congratulated them, while I, his mother, sat at home in silence, scrolling like some forgotten outsider. I dropped the phone onto the table, my vision blurred with tears. My heart pounded, torn between rage and devastation. For a moment, I actually wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe it really was a small ceremony. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe. But then I remembered the pale pink dress hanging uselessly in my closet, the shoes polished and ready, the $1,000 saved for a wedding gift. I remembered cleaning the house until my back ached, imagining the newlyweds walking through my door afterwards so we could celebrate together. I remembered the late-night call to my sister Diana, her voice cracking with joy when I told her, "David's finally getting married." And now I had to call her again, not to share joy, but to explain why I wasn't in a single photo. When I told Diana, her silence on the other end of the line said everything. Finally, she whispered, "Margaret, you mean they didn't even invite you?" Her voice broke me. Saying it out loud made it real. "No," I admitted, my voice raw. "They invited her parents, her siblings, even cousins I've never met. But not me. I was not special enough." Diana's sharp inhale carried through the phone. "That's not just cruel. That's evil." I wanted to argue, to soften it, but I couldn't. For the first time, I saw the truth clearly. This wasn't a mistake, or forgetfulness, or some logistical mishap. It was deliberate. A choice. Later that night, David called. His voice was unusually soft, rehearsed like lines in a bad play. "Mom, it was just a small ceremony, okay? Intimate. We couldn't invite everyone." I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Don't lie to me, David." I saw the pictures. Silence, then a sigh. "Mom, please don't make this harder. Clara's parents helped so much with the wedding. We wanted to honor them." My blood boiled. Honor them? What about me? What about 3 years of rent checks, of grocery bags, of covering bills so he and Clara could play house without worry? What about the nights I went hungry so they could eat steak? What about the thousands drained from my savings so Clara could wear that damn dress? "David," I whispered, my voice shaking, "your wife told me I wasn't special, and you let her." He didn't respond. The silence was louder than any scream. When I hung up, I sat in the dark, the glow of my phone lighting up again and again with notifications, likes, comments, tagged photos of a wedding I was never meant to see. Each ping was a knife twisting deeper. I realized then that the betrayal wasn't just exclusion, it was deception. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had used me. Every dollar I gave, every sacrifice I made, had been fuel for a celebration where I didn't even exist. And that was the night my grief hardened into something unrecognizable. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was furious. It had been exactly 7 days since that nightmarish discovery on social media. 7 days since my heart was ripped open by photos of my son and his bride, smiling in a world where I didn't exist. I had spent those days in a strange fog, caught between numbness and rage, drifting through my routines like a ghost. And then, on the 7th day, my phone rang. Clara's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to let it ring until her desperation dissolved into silence, but curiosity and something darker made me swipe the screen. Her voice was nothing like the confident woman who had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't special. This voice trembled, cracked, pleaded. "Margaret, thank God you answered. The rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, we're out. You forgot to make the transfer." Forgot. The audacity of that word nearly made me laugh. As though paying their bills had been my responsibility. As though 3 years of siphoning my savings had been nothing more than a clerical duty I'd neglected. I sat in silence, letting her panic spill into the line. "Please, Margaret, we don't have the money right now. David's hours were cut, and my student loan payment cleared early. We're drowning. If you don't help us, we could lose the apartment." I thought about all the times I'd run to the bank with shaking hands, withdrawing from my retirement just to make sure they had a roof. The times I'd canceled my own doctor's appointments because Clara had emergencies. The nights I ate beans and rice so I could send them money for wine and takeout. I thought about the dress still hanging in my closet, the shoes that would never step foot in their wedding hall, the $1,000 saved as a gift for a ceremony I had been banned from. And then, suddenly, clarity washed over me. It wasn't bitterness, it was power. I steadied my voice, calm, almost gentle, the way you'd speak before delivering a fatal blow. "Clara," I said, "don't you remember what you told me?" Silence crackled on the line. "You said you only invited special people to your wedding." My voice sharpened. "Well, I suppose that means I don't help anymore, because I only help special people." The pause on the other end was so long I thought the call had dropped, but then came the stammer, her mask of confidence crumbling. "Margaret, I don't understand. We were always special to you. You said I was like a second daughter." Her words dripped with rehearsed sweetness, the same syrupy tone she used every time she wanted money. Lies dressed as affection. And once, I had believed them. But not anymore. "No," I said firmly. "You were never a daughter to me. You were an expense, a very expensive one." The silence stretched again, heavy, suffocating. I could almost hear her scrambling for another angle, another manipulation. Finally, she whispered, "Margaret, please. We're family." I laughed then, a sound even I didn't recognize, sharp, bitter, liberated. "Family?" I repeated. "Family doesn't exclude you from a wedding. Family doesn't treat you like a bank account. Family doesn't humiliate you in your own home." Her breathing grew ragged, and for the first time in years, I felt her fear. It wasn't the fear of losing me, it was the fear of losing access to me, to my money, to the comfort I had been stupid enough to provide. "Clara," I said coldly, "tell David I'm done. Tell him his mother has finally opened her eyes." And then, without waiting for her reply, I ended the call. I sat there for a long moment, phone in my hand, the silence ringing louder than her pleas. My heart was racing, but it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, an adrenaline I hadn't felt in years. For once, I wasn't the one trembling. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't wallow. Instead, I pulled out my checkbook, my bank statements, and a calculator. I was done with vague estimates. I needed to know exactly how much of my life I had poured into theirs. And as I began to tally the numbers, the weight of every sacrifice finally took form. That night, with Clara's desperate voice still echoing in my head, I spread my papers across the kitchen table like a battlefield map. The lamp above flickered against the white pages, bank statements, check stubs, scribbled notes I had kept over the years. Each line was a memory, each dollar a piece of my life siphoned away. I picked up my calculator, its buttons worn from decades of balancing household budgets. My hands shook, not from age, but from the fury building inside me. For once, I didn't try to soften the truth. I wrote down every expense, every so-called favor, every sacrifice they had wrung out of me. Rent, $500 a month, 36 months straight. That alone was $18,000. $18,000. Gone. Not for my home, not for my security, but for theirs. Food and groceries. I had delivered bags of vegetables, meat, bread, even little luxuries when they wanted them. At least $200 a month, sometimes more. Over 3 years, that was $7,200. Furniture. $1,200 for their living room set, which Clara lounged on when she told me I wasn't special. Car loan. $2,500, handed over with the naive hope they would repay. They never did. Medical emergencies. $800 for Clara's hospital bill that I never saw proof of. $600 for an air conditioner repair that somehow never appeared on an invoice. Gifts. Birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries, small amounts at the time, but when I added them together, the total was staggering. At least $3,000, probably more. The numbers glared up at me. $33,400. $33,400. I sat back in my chair, the air thick with the weight of that number. I whispered it aloud, as if saying it could make it less real. 33,000. 33,000. That was the inheritance Robert had left me, the money he had worked overtime for, the savings we had built together so that I could live my last years in dignity. 33,000 meant trips I never took, friends I stopped seeing, hobbies I abandoned. It meant coats I patched instead of replaced, dinners I skipped, nights I lay awake wondering how I'd make ends meet while still covering theirs. And for what? For a son who looked away when I cried. For a daughter-in-law who called me mom only when she wanted money. For a wedding I funded without being invited. My vision blurred with hot tears, but they weren't the tears of sadness I had shed so often. No, these were tears of fury, of awakening. They burned as they fell, each one washing away years of humiliation. I thought about all the times I told myself I was buying love, that if I gave enough, one day they'd see me, cherish me, thank me. But love doesn't come with receipts. And gratitude doesn't need constant reminders. I realized then that I hadn't been giving. I had been bleeding, slowly, silently, until I was almost hollow. I pushed the papers aside and stumbled to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried loud, unrestrained sobs that echoed off the walls. But as the minutes passed, something changed. The tears slowed. My breathing steadied. And in the mirror across the room, I caught sight of myself. The same tired eyes, the same lines etched by time, but there was something new there, too. A hardness, a clarity, a spark I hadn't seen in years. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had been wronged, a woman who had endured humiliation after humiliation, and a woman who was finally ready to fight. For decades, I had carried the weight of everyone else's needs, silencing my own. But that night, as I wiped the tears from my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. No more. No more automatic transfers. No more late-night calls that drained me. No more patching up my life so theirs could be comfortable. The next morning I made myself a cup of coffee, not as a servant to their needs, but as a woman reclaiming her life. The steam rose from the mug, and I breathed it in like the air of a new world. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was resolve. They thought they had broken me with those 4 words, only special people. But what they didn't know was that they had awakened something inside me, something far more dangerous than grief. They had awakened the part of me that was done being used. The very next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I didn't reach for my phone to check whether David or Clara had messaged me. No, I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the steam as though it were a taste of freedom. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the mountain of papers from the night before, one thought rang clear in my mind. This ends today. I grabbed my purse, tucked the papers neatly inside, and drove to the bank. Walking through those glass doors, I felt like I was stepping into a battlefield. But this time, I wasn't a victim, I was a commander. Mr. Klein, the branch manager, had known me for years. He'd been the one processing every transfer to David's account, month after month. When he spotted me, he smiled warmly, but his expression shifted when he saw the determination in my eyes. "Mrs. Collins," he greeted, "is everything all right?" "No, Mr. Klein," I said firmly, "but it's about to be." I sat across from him and laid my papers on his desk. "I want to cancel all the automatic transfers to my son's account, effective immediately, and I want my accounts locked down. No one else should have access to a single penny of my money." He blinked, surprised. For 3 years, I had been as predictable as sunrise, the faithful mother who bled herself dry to keep her son afloat. "Are you sure?" he asked cautiously. "This is a sudden change." "What happened?" I said, my voice steady. "Is that I opened my eyes. I've been financing 2 grown adults while neglecting myself. That ends now. From today forward, my money belongs to me." Mr. Klein studied me for a moment, and to my surprise, I saw something in his gaze I hadn't seen in my own son's in years. Genuine concern. "I have to say this, Mrs. Collins," he said softly. "I've seen many cases like yours. Parents giving until there's nothing left. Sometimes they never get to reclaim their lives. But you're making the right choice." His words nearly broke me. This man, who knew me only through transactions and signatures, cared more about my well-being than my own son. As he processed the cancellations, my phone buzzed in my purse. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't need to check to know who it was. David and Clara had a sixth sense for when their pipeline was in danger. For years they had called me the moment rent was due, the moment bills piled up, the moment their lifestyle wobbled. And now, they must have felt the shift. I didn't answer. For the first time in years, I let it ring. When Mr. Klein handed me the final papers, I felt lighter, like I had set down a load I'd been carrying for decades. "It's done," he said. "Thank you," I replied. And I meant it. Not just for the paperwork, but for the validation, the quiet acknowledgement that I wasn't crazy for wanting to protect myself. On the drive home, I noticed things I hadn't in years. The way the sun filtered through the trees, the way kids laughed in the park. I stopped at a cafe, not for anyone else, not to pick up food for David or Clara, but for myself. I ordered a slice of cake, something I hadn't allowed in years because every extra dollar had gone to them. The first bite tasted like rebellion. When I got home, the silence greeted me again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. For the first time in years, my house was mine. My table was mine. My money was mine. I sat down, phone still buzzing with unanswered calls, and whispered to myself, "This is the beginning." But deep inside, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. People who feed off others rarely let go without a fight. And David and Clara? They weren't just going to accept this new reality. They would come, and when they did, I would be ready. I should have known the peace wouldn't last. It was only 2 days after I'd canceled the transfers when I pulled into my driveway and froze. 3 cars were parked in front of my house, David's, Clara's, and a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. Through the front window, I saw shadows moving across the living room. My living room. For a moment, I sat there in the car, heart pounding, wondering if I had the strength to face what waited inside. But then anger surged. This was my house. I had given them keys years ago, foolishly thinking they might one day need to let themselves in to check on me. I hadn't realized I'd invited wolves into my den. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The scene hit me like a slap. David sat hunched on the sofa with his head in his hands, Clara pacing like a caged animal, and a gray-haired man in a crisp suit calmly flipping through my personal papers spread across the dining table. My bank statements, my documents, my life. What is going on here? My voice cracked through the room, sharper than I intended. They all turned at once, startled, as if I were the intruder. Clara rushed forward, her tone dripping with false urgency. "Margaret, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher, from a family law firm. He's here to help, with your situation." "My situation?" I repeated, incredulous. "I'm perfectly fine. What situation are you talking about?" David finally lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot. He looked at me with an expression that might have passed for concern if I didn't know better. "Mom, we went to the bank, and they said you canceled the transfers. You also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand. Why would you do that?" I moved to the table, snatching up the papers that Mr. Fisher had been casually leafing through. "These are my private documents. You have no right to touch them." "Mrs. Collins," Mr. Fisher interjected smoothly, extending his hand as if we were meeting under polite circumstances. "I'm only here to assist. Your children are worried about you. They've noticed unusual behavior, confusion, paranoia, abrupt decisions that don't reflect your usual self. They believe you may need some temporary guidance to manage your finances. My stomach twisted. Guidance. That was their word for theft. Paranoia? I laughed bitterly. So protecting my own money after being used for years is paranoia? Clara stepped closer, her eyes glassy, voice trembling with manufactured tenderness. Margaret, honey, we're just worried. You've been under stress. Loneliness at your age can affect judgment. Her words lit a fire in my chest. Loneliness, judgment. They were painting me as a confused old woman, fragile and incompetent. And I suddenly understood the plan. You want to declare me incompetent? I said slowly, each word slicing through the air. David stood, trying to sound reasonable, though his voice shook. Mom, don't be dramatic. This is just a power of attorney, so Clara and I can manage things until you feel better. I glanced at the folder Mr. Fisher slid toward me across the table, the legal papers ready, as though they had expected me to crumble. I picked it up, looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, and tossed it straight into the trash can. The only thing I'm signing is your exit out of my house. Clara's mask cracked then. Her tears vanished, replaced with icy rage. You can't do this to us, Margaret. We've counted on you. We made commitments. We took loans because we knew you'd support us. Obligations built on my money, not my consent. I shot back. David's face reddened. He stepped closer, voice rising like a child denied candy. Mom, you're being unreasonable. Everything you have will be ours one day anyway. We're just trying to manage it now. And there it was. The naked truth. To them, I was already gone. My money was theirs, my house theirs, my life nothing but a waiting room until inheritance. Get out! My voice shook with fury. All 3 of you, out of my house. Mr. Fisher tried to salvage the performance, clearing his throat with practiced calm. Mrs. Collins, if your children believe your capacity is impaired, they have the right to seek guardianship through the courts. I advise you to consider cooperation. Mr. Fisher, I said, locking eyes with him. I suggest you reconsider threatening a 71-year-old woman who has managed her affairs flawlessly for decades. Now leave. The silence that followed was thick. Then Clara's voice, sharp and venomous. This isn't over, Margaret. We have rights, and we'll use every lawyer we can find. Use your own money for once, I snapped. They shuffled toward the door, their dignity shattered. David paused at the threshold, his voice low and bitter. You'll regret this, Mom. One day you'll be old and helpless, and no one will be there for you. I met his eyes, and for the first time, I felt no fear. David, I said softly, I've already been alone. The difference is, now it's by choice. The door slammed behind them, leaving me in a silence so pure it felt like freedom. But I knew this was only the beginning. They wouldn't stop here. And if they wanted a war, then a war was exactly what they were going to get. The silence in my house after they left was deafening. I stood in the middle of my living room, staring at the papers they had rifled through, my chest tight with fury and disbelief. My own son, my own flesh and blood. To walk into my house with a stranger, paw through my life, and demand control of everything I had worked for it was a betrayal deeper than any wound. But beneath the anger, something else burned, a clarity. If they wanted to play games with lawyers and documents, then I would fight them on their own battlefield. The very next morning, I dug through my old address book until I found a name I hadn't thought of in years. Robert Parker, an attorney who had helped me settle my husband's estate after his death. He was kind, meticulous, and most importantly, he specialized in protecting seniors. I called his office, and within hours, I was sitting across from him in a polished conference room. His gray hair and gentle eyes gave me a comfort I hadn't felt in days. Margaret, he said after I finished telling him everything, what your son and daughter-in-law are attempting is called elder financial abuse. And make no mistake, it's not just immoral, it's criminal. The words sent a shiver down my spine, but also steadied me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was a target. We'll start by documenting everything, Parker continued. Every transfer, every gift, every so-called emergency. Then we'll secure your accounts at a second bank, install safeguards, and file a notice in case they try to bring fraudulent claims. For 3 hours, we combed through my financial history. As I laid out every receipt, every transfer slip, Parker whistled low. Over $33,000 in 3 years, Margaret. That's not support, that's exploitation. Hearing him say it out loud was both painful and liberating. For years I had called it love. Now finally, someone named it for what it really was: abuse. When I left his office, I felt armed, not just with papers, but with knowledge. If David and Clara wanted a war, I now had a general by my side. That afternoon, I stopped at a hardware store I used to visit for supplies, always for David and Clara's apartment, never my own. The owner, Mr. Summers, raised an eyebrow when he saw me. "Another emergency for the kids?" he asked kindly. "Not this time," I replied with a smile that felt foreign on my lips. "This time it's for me. I need new locks. The best ones you've got." He nodded without asking questions. As he gathered the locks, his son Ethan, a tall young man with a kind face, came out from the back. "We also install security systems," Ethan offered. "Cameras, alarms, full setup." It felt like destiny. "Yes," I said firmly. I want it all. By the time I walked out of that store, my arms were full of locks, my appointment booked for the next morning. For the first time in years, I wasn't patching up someone else's life. I was protecting my own. When I got home, dusk was falling. I was about to unload the boxes when a soft voice called out, "Mrs. Collins?" I turned to see a woman standing at the edge of my yard. She was around my age, maybe a little younger, with kind eyes and graying curls pulled into a bun. "I'm Eleanor Brooks," she said. "I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we never really talked. Last night I heard shouting from your house. Are you all right?" Her concern pierced me deeper than I expected. Here was a near stranger, showing more care than my own son had in months. I hesitated, then invited her in. I made us both coffee, and before I realized it, the whole story spilled out of me: the secret wedding, the humiliation, the invasion with the lawyer. Eleanor listened silently, her eyes soft, her hands folded around the mug. When I finished, her eyes glistened. "Margaret," she whispered, "you did the right thing. 5 years ago, my daughter did the same thing to me. She drained my savings, made me believe I had to keep giving, or I wasn't a good mother. When I finally cut her off, she tried to have me declared incompetent too." My breath caught. "And what happened?" "She failed," Eleanor said simply. "I fought back. I built a new life. And now, after years of distance, she's finally learning to stand on her own 2 feet. Our relationship is healing, but on my terms this time, not hers." Her story lit something inside me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. But now I had a neighbor who understood, who had walked this road and survived. Before she left, Eleanor touched my arm. "Don't let them make you doubt yourself, Margaret. You are not weak. You are not confused. You are reclaiming your life. And if you need me, I'm right next door." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Not because the storm had passed, it hadn't, but because I knew I wasn't fighting it alone anymore. I thought installing the locks and cameras would give me peace. For a few days, it did. I drank my coffee on the porch, watched the sunlight flicker across the trees, and felt for the first time in years that my life was mine. But predators don't retreat quietly when you cut them off. They escalate. It started with phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I blocked one, then another, then another. Each voicemail sounded the same. Clara's voice, syrupy and desperate. "Margaret, please, we just need to talk. You're making a mistake. We love you." Every word dripped with manipulation. I deleted them all. Then, on a Tuesday morning, the doorbell rang. My new cameras showed a well-dressed young woman on my porch, holding a folder. She had that professional smile people wear when they've come to deliver bad news. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins," she said crisply. "My name is Lisa Schmidt. I'm a social worker with the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report of concerning behavior, abrupt financial changes, social isolation, installation of unnecessary security measures. I'm here to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. I knew instantly where this had come from. "Clara." I forced my voice to stay calm. "Do you have identification?" She flashed an official badge, and my stomach sank. This wasn't just Clara's dramatics. This was the government, on my doorstep, because my own family had painted me as a paranoid, senile old woman. "May I come in?" Schmidt asked politely. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. but refusing would only feed the narrative that I was unstable. I opened the door. She sat at my dining table, pulling out forms, clicking her pen. Her tone was professional, but her questions were sharp. "Mrs. Collins, why did you suddenly stop supporting your son financially? Don't you feel that's your responsibility as a mother?" The audacity nearly knocked me off my chair. "My responsibility as a mother," I said slowly, "ended when I raised David to adulthood. He is 35 years old. He has a wife. Supporting their lifestyle is not my obligation, it was a choice, and I have chosen to stop." She scribbled notes. "We were also told you've been exhibiting paranoia, installing cameras, changing locks, cutting off contact with your family. Are you afraid of them?" "Yes," I answered bluntly, "because they broke into my house with a lawyer and tried to force me into signing away control of my finances." That made her pause. "And medical care?" she asked. "Any conditions you're neglecting? Any prescriptions you've stopped taking?" I almost laughed. "I take vitamins. Occasionally aspirin. My last physical was excellent. There is nothing wrong with me." Before she could ask more, I excused myself and dialed Mr. Parker, my attorney. Within 20 minutes, he walked through the door, his presence shifting the energy in the room. "Miss Schmidt," he said firmly, showing his own credentials, "my client is under my legal representation. Unless you have a court order, this interrogation ends now." She looked flustered. "I'm only here to ensure her safety," her family reported. "Yes," Parker cut in, "the same family that excluded her from their wedding, drained over $33,000 from her accounts, and attempted to coerce her into signing a power of attorney. We have documentation of every transfer. If anyone requires investigation, it's them." Schmidt's pen froze. I saw it in her eyes the narrative she'd been given didn't match the woman sitting in front of her. Still, she tried once more. "Mrs. Collins, do you live independently? Drive your own car? Pay your bills?" "Yes," I said, locking eyes with her. "And I can show you every statement, every receipt, every proof you need. I am not incompetent. I am not paranoid. I am protecting myself from abuse." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she quietly gathered her papers. "I will close this case," she said at last. When she left, my knees gave out and I collapsed into a chair. Mr. Parker put a steady hand on my shoulder. "They're desperate, Margaret. That visit proves it. They'll try everything. Government agencies, false witnesses, even court. You must be prepared." I nodded, trembling but resolute. "Then we prepare." That night, Eleanor came by with a pot of soup. I told her everything, and she nodded knowingly. "They're escalating. That's what happens when you take away an addict's supply. But Margaret, you're stronger than they realize, and you're not alone." As I sipped her soup, warmth spreading through me, I felt the truth of her words. They would try harder. They would stoop lower. But I wasn't that naive, trembling woman anymore. If they wanted a war, then I was ready for battle. 3 weeks later, the battle I had been dreading became reality. I sat in the courthouse hallway, my hands folded tightly in my lap, as my attorney, Robert Parker, reviewed the thick stack of files we had prepared. On the other side of the corridor, David and Clara sat with their own lawyer, a tall, silver-haired man in a navy suit who exuded confidence, the kind built on winning too many cases like this. Clara wore black, as though attending a funeral, her face carefully painted with sorrow. David sat stiffly, eyes fixed on the floor. He wouldn't meet mine. When the clerk opened the doors, my knees nearly buckled. This wasn't just a case. It was my dignity on trial, my right to live free from their control. The proceedings began with their lawyer, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Your Honor, my clients, David and Clara Collins, are deeply concerned about Mrs. Collins' well-being. She has demonstrated erratic behavior, cutting off financial support without reason, isolating herself, installing unnecessary surveillance systems. They fear she is being manipulated by outsiders and is no longer capable of managing her affairs. Therefore, we are requesting guardianship to ensure her safety and stability." I felt my stomach turn. Safety. Stability. They made my liberation sound like madness. Then came their testimonies. Clara went first. Her performance could have won awards. She dabbed her eyes delicately with a tissue. "Your Honor, Margaret has always been like a second mother to me. But in the last few months, she's changed. She's paranoid. She accuses us of terrible things. She even called the police on her own son. We only want to help her. We love her." I clenched my fist so hard my nails dug crescents into my palms. Love, isolating me from my own son's wedding, invading my home, rifling through my papers, was that love? Parker stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Collins," he said evenly, "can you tell the court when was the last time you called Margaret without asking her for money?" Clara's mascaraed eyes blinked. We talked about many things. A date, please." I don't remember exactly. Is it true you and David were married without inviting her?" "It was a small ceremony." "Is it true you told her?" And I quote, "We only invited special people?" Clara's cheeks flushed. "Those words were taken out of context." "And what context," Parker pressed, "makes those words acceptable to say to your mother-in-law?" The courtroom murmured. Clara lowered her gaze. Next, David took the stand. My heart clenched when he raised his right hand to swear the oath. I saw not my son, but a stranger. "My mother has always been generous," he began. "But lately she's become irrational. She cut us off suddenly, accused us of stealing, and is clearly influenced by manipulative neighbors and lawyers. We're just trying to protect her." Parker rose again. "Mr. Collins, how much money have you received from your mother in the past 3 years?" David shifted. I don't know. Would $33,400 sound accurate?" David's jaw tightened. "Maybe. She's always wanted to help. How many times have you visited your mother without asking for money?" David opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence was deafening. "Is it true you entered her home without permission and reviewed her private documents?" "We were worried about her." "Is it true you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney?" David's voice cracked. "We wanted to help her manage her finances." Parker's eyes narrowed. "At 35 years old, Mr. Collins, do you believe it is normal to depend on your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent?" David didn't answer. The judge scribbled notes, his brow furrowed. Then it was our turn. We called Mr. Green, the pharmacist Clara had tricked into signing a statement. He explained, under oath, how she had misrepresented his words. Next came Eleanor, who testified that I was clear-headed, strong, and fully independent. Members of her garden club also spoke, describing how they had seen me thrive since cutting David and Clara off. Finally, Dr. Moore, the psychologist Parker had arranged, presented my evaluation. Mrs. Collins scored above average for her age in all cognitive tests. She is fully capable of managing her affairs. And then it was me. I walked to the witness stand, my hands trembling, but my heart steady. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Collins," Parker began, "can you explain to the court why you decided to stop financially supporting your son and daughter-in-law?" I took a breath, my voice ringing clear in the courtroom. "Because I finally realized I was not their mother, I was their ATM. I spent $33,000 in 3 years to keep them comfortable while they excluded me from their lives. They didn't invite me to my son's wedding. They told me I wasn't special. And when I chose to protect myself, they tried to paint me as insane. That is not love. That is exploitation." Gasps rippled through the room. "Do you regret your decision?" Parker asked. "I only regret that it took me so long to make it." Their lawyer tried to rattle me on cross-examination. "Mrs. Collins, don't you feel it's your duty as a mother to support your son?" "My duty," I said firmly, "was to raise him until adulthood. He is 35 years old. He has a wife. If he cannot pay his rent, that is his failure, not mine." His face tightened. "Is it true you installed surveillance cameras?" "Yes, to protect myself from the people sitting right over there." The gallery chuckled softly. Even the judge suppressed a smile. Finally, after closing arguments, the judge retired to deliberate. 2 hours later, he returned. His face was stern, but his words were salvation. "After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court finds that Mrs. Collins is fully competent to manage her affairs. The request for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, the evidence suggests this petition was motivated by financial interest, not genuine concern." Relief washed over me so powerfully that tears streamed down my face. I had won, not just the case, but my freedom, my dignity, my life. As we left the courtroom, Clara's glare burned into me. David wouldn't even look my way. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw regret flicker in his eyes, but it was too late. The son I had loved so fiercely was gone, replaced by greed I could never forgive. That night, surrounded by Eleanor and my new friends, we toasted with wine. To freedom, Elfrida declared, raising her glass. And to Margaret, who proved that strength doesn't fade with age. And for the first time in decades, I felt alive. The morning after the verdict, I woke to a silence I hadn't known in years. A silence that wasn't heavy with fear or humiliation, but light with possibility. The war was over. I had stood in court, faced down my own son and his wife, and won. The judge's words still echoed in my head. Fully competent, request for guardianship denied. For the first time in decades, I was free. Within a month, I made a decision that shocked even me. I sold my house, the house filled with ghosts of sacrifices, arguments, and late-night wire transfers, and moved into a sunlit apartment downtown. The moment I stepped onto the balcony of my new place, overlooking the bustle of the city, I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt since my 20s: exhilaration. Half of the money from the sale, I donated to organizations that protect seniors from financial abuse. I wanted to make sure other mothers like me, women who had been drained and discarded, would find the strength and support to fight back. The other half, I kept. Not for David, not for Clara, for me. And oh, how I used it. I booked a ticket to Italy, something Robert and I had always dreamed of but never managed. I walked the streets of Florence, gazed at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and sipped espresso in little cafes where no one knew my name. I painted again, my brush gliding across canvas with colors I thought I had lost. I joined Eleanor's garden club, laughing with women who understood me in ways my own son never had. For once, every dollar I spent was mine to enjoy, not a chain around my neck. And yet, some nights, when I looked up at the stars from my new balcony, I couldn't help but think of David, the boy who once ran to me with scraped knees, who whispered, "You're the best mom in the world," when I tucked him into bed. Where had he gone? Was he ever truly there? Or had I blinded myself, mistaking dependence for love? I'll never know. What I do know is this: true love cannot be bought. If it has a price, it isn't love. It's a transaction. I learned that too late, but not too late to change my life. My name is Margaret Collins. I am 71 years old. I have lost a son to greed, but I have gained something even more precious: my freedom. And if you're listening to my story, I want to ask you, what would you do if your child betrayed you like this? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Or would you, like me, finally choose yourself? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because there are so many more stories of strength, betrayal, and survival waiting to be told. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not anger, not bitterness, but living the life they never wanted you to have, free, joyful, and utterly your own.